Melee in an FPS game will always be a controversial topic if we label the game as an FPS game, because people will be very quick to explain to you that the S stands for shooter. Lately, over the last few seasons, we've seen a large discussion around melee weapons and their balancing. There's also been a lot of confusion involving me and melee weapons, so I felt we should address all of that while we get into the discussions around each melee weapon that I think deserves to be talked about. So recently, I've noticed an uptick in people blaming me for the Sledgehammer nerf. Some people are under the impression I'm an Embark employee, so let me clarify, no, I do not work for Embark, and no, I do not balance the game. The other confusion comes from a video where I discussed how one heavy weapon was standing out, and that was the Sledgehammer. What I had stated in the video was that there was a change to melee hit detection in one patch, which made the combos on the Sledgehammer inconsistent. Sometimes combos seemed to go through a little bit faster than what was intended. I had suggested that Sledge might be due for a rework, since the heavy hitters mode really showed us how fun melee weapons can be when they are designed around specific mechanics that suit the game mode. I also suggested a nerf, and again, this was in the realm of fixing the combo windows to allow more counterplay with some classes and loadouts, or to take the approach of nerfing something while they rework it. My thoughts on Sledgehammer nerf for Season 7 is that it was a bit of an overkill. The damage values, in my opinion, were fine, and I don't think I had ever asked for damage nerfs, especially to this degree. I believe that the server and netcode were leading to more issues than what the weapon actually was. I even stated that in the video, Goose Sledge players were Chads, and to not worry, implying my issue lies with the interaction with Winch and Sledge due to what I believe is server issues. Now, looking at their nerf, we went from 115 left click to 100 and 200 on the right click to 154. Now, these numbers clearly are meant to remove combos using quick melee, which feels like they're going in the direction away from mechanics and combo timing. I'm really curious what everyone's opinion is on the Sledge nerf, as it seems the majority of people that I have talked to seem to be really happy about this nerf. And while I do believe Sledge needed some changes, I'm not sure that this was the way to do it. Now, a suggestion I had is to rework the way that quick melee is. So since it is a melee weapon, I feel like quick melee could be spiced up a little bit and make it a little bit more interactive with the rest of the weapon, and potentially rework all of them. So quick melee and both the left click and right click all function a little bit more, maybe have different mechanics to make the weapon a little bit more interesting, so that people have a little bit more variety just between knowing which buttons to press and in which order, depending on who you're facing. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, you could add a bit of a knockback effect to quick melee in case you ever needed to push somebody away from your teammate, or maybe even the cash out station. We could also look into making, say, for example, the right click have a AoE slow effect. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that we should do these things. I'm just giving some suggestions as to how we could add a little bit more functionality between the quick melee, left click, and right click on some of these weapons to make them a little bit more engaging to both use and face. I always thought during the heavy hitters, it would be really cool if I could knock somebody up with the Sledgehammer and then winch them while they're in the air. Doing stuff like that could just be really fancy and add a little bit more fun and flair to the way that some of these fights go. But I think that would be up to the developers and the community as a whole to come up with some cool concepts on how we might be able to rework them if that's the route we want to go down. Now to talk about the next big topic, and that is the sword. Now the sword got a pretty significant change back in the day, and after the nerf of the sword, I had stated back then that I felt like the nerf was a bit overboard. Now to explain some of the changes that I had wanted for the sword and things that I had requested, which I've actually directly asked the developers for, was basically just to simply remove the Phantom Strike and look into fixing the hit registration. These are the two biggest things that I had concerns for, and hit registration isn't really just a problem with sword. It really happened with a lot of weapons, but it felt a little bit exaggerated in the super lunge. So do I support the lunge nerf, reducing the damage? No, not really. The problems I have had with this weapon have always been involving exploits and bugs, and outside of that, the damage values didn't really bother me. I think nerfing the right click, again, was a hit to the quick melee interactions, which feels like it is becoming a common trend for melee weapons, which is why, again, I think reworking the function of quick melee could be a fun approach. but I want to hear from you guys on what you like to see implemented with this. Now, to all the new people who don't regularly watch my content, my streams, or even chat with me in the Discord, if you want to come chat with me over at twitch.tv/apo or join the Discord if you ever want to discuss anything balance or game related, I'm always down to discuss any topics. Hopefully this will lead to a little bit less confusion in the future. I'm usually very open to discussions with everybody, and I try to reply to basically every DM I get, assuming it's not spam or something pointless. Now, the rest of the melee lineup includes Dagger, Riot Shield, Dual Blades, and Spear, all of which tend to sit near the bottom of tier lists, which seemed odd when one of these weapons, the Dagger, got a nerf that felt quite unwarranted. Basically, you can no longer backstab stuff like Goo and Turret, and there does seem to be a trend where we see close range weapons fall into this problem with balancing, where melee and shotguns do get treated pretty similarly. For example, when a shotgun is viable in most maps and in too many scenarios, people are quick to beg for nerfs. The Model 1887, the Cerberus are victims of this pattern, although some shotguns still remain in the meta, such as the SA-1216, the M26 Matter, and even the SH-1900. Melee falls into a similar category here, even though these are still niche picks, often not ideal for things like suspended structure or large maps like Kyoto, for example. People tend to hate these types of weapons the most. And it doesn't matter the game, people just hate these weapons. It's like it's a part of who we are as gamers. Do I hate them? Well, when I die to them, yes. And here's a list on screen of all the things I hate when I die to them. It's the lowest common denominator to simply blame your death on the things you die to rather than your own mistakes. All of us are guilty to it from time to time. I also think a problem that becomes prevalent in the finals is feeling like you need a counter. Some playstyles, such as smoke plus thermal, often require a light on an enemy team to use thermal in order to counter it. Some playstyles, like melee, fall into a weird place where while there are plenty of counters, this often requires you to predict or know that the enemy will use one of these particular weapons or playstyles, and then you need to bring the counter for it. Now, this is a problem that only really exists in ranked, and not so much in World Tour or Quick Play, where you can swap to reserves in the middle of a match. And this isn't really a problem with melee, shotguns, or even smoke, for example. These just get exaggerated by not being able to swap to the counter when you run into them. Now, in summary, melee sits in a weird place, but I want to hear your opinions on it. Does melee belong in an FPS? Should melee be stronger, weaker, or removed? I personally would like a world where all options feel fair and balanced, but realistically, I don't think we will ever get there because personal preference will always become a problem in the way that people perceive how a game should be balanced, especially when one weapon or playstyle can hard counter another, leading to claims of it being overpowered, when in reality, it just simply counters the way that you play. Subscribe if you aren't already. I'll be covering lots of Season 7 related details soon. Thank you to all my members on YouTube. I appreciate the support. It's very easy to become a member. I keep the membership super cheap if you are interested. If Embark ever makes a change you disagree with, remember the real culprit. Thanks, Obama. Now grab a hammer, sword, or a gun, whatever you prefer, and I will see you in the finals.